I channeled my energy forward through the hall, wanting so much to go back to the room, flop onto the bed, and sleep. However, something in my gut stopped me from moving as I approached my bedroom door. Huh? Something felt wrong. Whether it was something in the air or my natural instinct screaming at me, something was throwing me off and I couldn't pin down why. As a pained groan escaped the room, my suspicions were confirmed. I peeked into the bedroom to see Damien curled up in bed, gripping his head and pressing his knees into his chest. Damien! I rushed over and knelt by the bed, now insanely worried. What was happening with him? As I got close, however, Damien jetted his hand out, facing his palm to me in a tense position.
Stop! Don't!
I froze in place. His face was contorted to one of extreme pain, gritting his teeth and crushing his eyebrows together in a tight expression of agony. I couldn't tell what was going on, but whatever it was torturing him. Is this like his demon powers coming back to him and his body's like freaking out? Damien violently shook his head, digging his fingers further into his head.
Please, just stop!
Help! Somehow. I needed to find some way to help him. I began to think of everything I could do. Get the brothers, get Diana, get someone to heal him. I could hold him close and try and soothe him. However, the more I thought of things to do, the more Damien began to close in on himself, shaking. My eyes widened in realization. Oh, he's like, stop thinking about anything. He was getting bombarded with thoughts, and I was adding to it. At that moment, I let my mind go blank, hoping it would help Damien calm down. As I did, Damien continued to shake, but not as violently as he did before. However, a full minute passed and nothing had changed. I began to instinctively worry, but I forced the feeling into my chest and continued to let my head remain empty of thought. Damien attempted to take deep breaths, trying to calm down further, but to no avail. I became even more worried than before. What was I supposed to do?
Libera mente tua.
Oh, well, thank goodness she's here. The sound of Diana's voice echoed through the room, forcing me to turn around and look at her as she stood in the doorway. She stared hard at Damien, holding a hand out to him. Her fingers and palm began to glow a dark purple color, like a flame dancing over her skin. Whoa. This poor boy. He's having such a rough time. Damien slowly rolled onto his knees on the bed, still gripping his head and growling to himself as Diana slowly approached him, holding her hand close to his forward-tilting head.
Libera mente tua.
The flames around Diana's hand sparked, intensifying in its glow, as Damien winced and hissed out from a sting of pain. I continued to remain still, not wanting to add to the pressure in Damien's head, but confused as to what Diana was doing. Very slowly, Damien's head began to glow the same purple color before a stream of purple energy began to trickle from him towards Diana's hand. As it connected, the energy around Damien's head began to fade at last, and Damien's tense form began to relax. Diana tensed her hands and caused the flame around her skin to warp around itself, forming an orb above her palm as she turned it towards her. As it settled into a physical purple ball, she grasped it and let it shatter in her hand. Glass and blood began to trickle from her closed grip as Damien finally released a breath of air, slamming his hands down on the mattress beneath him and curling himself further over his knees. Damien? I instinctively reached over and placed my hands on his arm, feeling the cold sweat run down them from the struggle he was fighting against earlier. He was paler than before, but his face slowly melted to an expression of calm relief. I looked back at Diana, seeing her lift her hand to her mouth and lick over her new wounds. Blood trickled down her arm, but she managed to catch most of it with her tongue, unfazed by Damien's sudden relaxation or my stare. What did you do? Diana kept her focus on her arm and hand as she replied.
I did something that his brothers should have done a long time ago. Placed a barrier on his mind.
Interesting. What? I furrowed my eyebrows in confusion, not understanding what she meant. As Diana finally looked back at me, she let out a sigh at my expression.
He can read minds, but he can't control it. However, imagine putting a bubble around his thoughts. He wouldn't be able to hear anything but his own. This is precisely what I have done.
That's true. Like, I'm not sure how old Damien is, but in all that time he, never learned a way to only read minds when he wanted to. It's just a constant thing. He just hears thoughts whether he wants to or not. Then what was that energy you pulled from him?
That was something that shouldn't have been there. It's nothing to be concerned about. Right, Damien?
What does that mean? Again, I became more confused. However, I looked up to Damien to see him looking up at Diana with almost a forced, thankful look. I could tell he was grateful for the assistance, but I could tell he was still angry with her.
However, that spell won't last forever. He'll need to maintain it using energy. But I'm sure you can provide that, correct?
I was lost, but I understood what she was saying, not in an acknowledgement, I guess. What did you take from Damien? I wanted to know exactly what was going on. The confusion that was going on throughout the day of Damien's well-being was too much to ignore, and I needed to sort it out. If not for him, then for my own sanity. Diana gave me a firm look, crossing her arms.
A little piece of the demon lord that has been haunting him. Happy?
A little bit more, but not quite satisfied yet. What? Diana shook her head and let out a sigh.
He can explain if you're that curious.
You're all for, like, just showing me his pain and terrible past way back when, but I guess now, not so much. Blurg. Reasons and so forth. Diana then turned on her heel and walked towards the door. Before she left, however, she turned back and looked at Damien.
Be careful how much you feed. You've been without energy for too long. You'll be craving soon.
Oh. Uh-oh. Can I have a safe word? Somehow? Yee. With those haunting words, Diana finally left the room as Damien laid his head on mine. He let out a tired sigh as I looked up at him, lost as ever. Just from his expression, I could tell that he was just beyond relieved to be out of whatever torture the mind reading had forced upon him. It was something he never wanted, and yet he had to endure it for the day until Diana blocked his mind. Why she didn't do it before was beyond me, but at least he was okay now. The more I thought about it, the more a part of me began to question the situation. If Damien could block out his mind reading, then would it be possible for him to want to be a demon again? As a demon, he had many interesting abilities. Then again, it was his decision, and from what he had told me about his past, he didn't wish to relive any of it with the skin he was born in. I let the inner conflict wane as I cupped Damien's cheek, feeling him nuzzle into it. Right now, Damien needed some tender, loving care, and I needed to provide it. Are you okay?
I am now.
I could hear the ease drip from his voice, making me smile. He was okay now. I slowly climbed into bed with him and wrapped my arms around his body, feeling him cuddle into my embrace and let out a hum of joy at the feeling. It was cute to see him like this, but then again, he was cute to begin with. Another reason why I loved him. 'Cause he's cute. I ran my hand slowly through his hair as I let him settle down from the ordeal he went through. I could tell he was exhausted, just like I was. However, he began to speak, making me awaken enough to pay attention to him.
I've been having nightmares, too.
Oh, interesting. Yes? You have? I looked down at Damien as he nodded and looked up at me. The dark circles under his eyes were much more prominent the closer I was to him, making me frown a bit at the sight. Still, he continued.
Some sort of shadow kept visiting me and taunting me for my choices. It would change shape every time, and just now, it only helped in making my mind-reading abilities worse.
A shadow, you say? I may have encountered something of that nature. Damien. I gave Damien a small squeeze, making him lean up and kiss my cheek before nuzzling his head into my shoulder, continuing.
I didn't want to worry you with it because I thought it was a side effect to becoming human. But I guess it was right. I was always a demon.
I frowned even further and nuzzled his head gently. It's gone now, right? There's nothing you need to worry about anymore.
I know.
Damien and I held on to each other, both settled into the situation we were under. This was a large step for us, and we had to somehow deal with this most likely after we returned to the demon world. Or human world. or whatever. Sentences. Would Damien get used to being a demon once again, or will he demand to try and become a human once more? I couldn't say for sure. The exhaustion that plagued us took over us at last, driving us to sleep within each other's arms. I half expected the night to be uneventful, but my thoughts began to plague me, trying to disassemble all of my discoveries and everything that happened to us in my subconscious. We were in the demon world, and Damien was back to being a demon, despite that fact that he never actually became human in the first place, even though Diana said that she had done it. The dizzying cycle of confusion waved around each thought, making them spin as I tried to organize and dissect them.
There's no use in trying, dear. You'll only become more confused in the end.
Diana's voice rang out in the air, causing me to look around in surprise at the dark. Diana?
Keep telling yourself that, dear. Whatever helps you sleep.
Yeah, so who is the Shadow? Like, I thought maybe it was Kay, but I know it's not Diana. I'm just not sure yet. I spun around the space, trying to pin down where her voice was coming from, but saw nothing but the black color of my imageless dreams greet me as I did. Still, Diana's voice rang out to me loud and clear, as if she were there watching and speaking to me somewhere nearby. Was this only meant to confuse me more? What do you want?
What do you think, dear? I'm here to haunt you and tell you how your life is a complete mess now that Damien is back to being a demon. Oh, wait. He was never human in the first place.
Why is my life only a mess because of Damien being a demon? I think it kind of became a mess after I got forcibly pulled here by the Demon Lord. Or am I wrong about that? I sneered at the dark, unbelieving what I was hearing. He might as well have been. He didn't have magic or mind reading or anything, so he was close enough.
Something tells me that you're actually happy about the turn of events, no?
Yeah, that I'm a little confused / concerned by. What?
Think about it. Damien with his powers. He's not a boring human. He can enthrall you and use magic and protect you forever and ever without worrying about human trivialities.
Bleh. I took a moment to myself, taking in what the voice proclaimed in Diana's voice. While it was true that Damien and I accepted his humanity, a part of me was rather excited to see him as a demon again. Angel. Maybe it was the nostalgia of meeting him as a demon, or maybe it was because it was a part of him I loved that made me happy. I couldn't tell. I mean, that's like saying, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good analogy. Like, it's like saying you love a guy because he's Asian, but if he were to, like, suddenly find out he wasn't really Asian, he's actually, like, I don't know, North American or Caucasian or whatever, then you would love that person much less. Like, don't you just love the person? Like, who cares if he's a demon or a human? He's just Damien. Angel. I don't know with you sometimes. At my silence, as I'm yelling at her, the voice in the air chuckled deeply.
See? There's nothing wrong with a little demon power. What was Damien thinking?
At that moment, my mind began to cloud with agreement. What was Damien thinking? Why desire to be a human? Humans were weaker than demons, and he could do so many things now that he had a barrier around his mind reading. He didn't have to give up his powers now, and everything would be completely okay. The voice disappeared, leaving the thought of Damien engraved in my dreams. He ran through my mind as the night passed to morning the next day. I woke up to Damien still in my arms. While the grogginess of the morning overtook my body and made me feel like going back to sleep, something about Damien in my arms made me keep my eyes open. He seemed at peace, finally having some shut-eye and getting proper rest. I felt a wave of happiness run through me, but at the same time, I couldn't help but remember the voice in my dreams. Damien was a demon. I ran my fingers through Damien's hair, becoming lost in thought once again. Was I being selfish? Yes. Or was I just being positive? No. Damien seemed to only hate his mind reading, and that was taken care of. At the same time, a wave of reality washed over my moral compass. Damien had to be the one to decide. It was his body, and he was the one ultimately living in it. But was it even possible to become human? The question crossed my mind and settled in as I stared at the far wall. Would Damien even have a choice? Well, if there was no choice in the matter, then Damien was set to live a happier life with his mind-reading ability under a barrier. I just had to give him energy, which didn't seem to be a big deal. As Damien nuzzled my shoulder in his sleep, I looked down at him and smiled. Yeah, it was okay. I rubbed my eyes but stopped as I managed to spot Diana at the doorway, holding 2 plates of food and leaning against the doorframe. The food looked delicious, but the intrusion was out of place. Diana? Diana placed a finger to her lips before walking over and gently placing the food she brought onto the table near the bed, being careful not to make noise. Damien seemed to cuddle closer, despite obviously smelling the food by the wiggle of his nose. I couldn't help but smile and nod to Diana, combing my fingers through Damien's hair as Diana crossed her arms and watched, lowering her voice to barely above a whisper to speak to me.
You seem to be in a good mood.
That is not just above a whisper. I nodded, looking up at the succubus as I gently gave Damien a squeeze. Yeah, Damien got some sleep, which is what he needed. I took the moment to look down at Damien's sleeping face, seeing how innocent and peaceful it was. The dark circles under his eyes seemed to have vanished, causing another relaxed wave to rush over me.
Have you given him any energy?
I shook my head, not remembering at all ever giving him energy. Whether he took energy in our sleep was something I would be unaware of, so I could only assume that he had not taken any from me at all. Diana pressed her lips together before looking to Damien.
You'll need to feed him energy soon.
I know. Diana nodded in reply before turning on her heel and walking to the door. Before she crossed the threshold, however, she looked back at me over her shoulder.
I'm curious about something.
Huh? What is it? For a moment, hesitation took over Diana's expression before she settled into her curiosity and asked.
What are your thoughts about him being a demon once again?
Oh, there's a loaded question. I stared at Diana, seeing the curiosity burn in her eyes. My grip slightly tightened around Damien as I let my thoughts try and construct an answer. At the same time, I wasn't entirely 100% sure myself. For me, what matters is he wants to be a demon. At the end of the day, Damien desired to be human above anything else. He made that clear when we met, and I wanted to respect his decision. Hell, I fell in love with him even as he became human. He and I were closer that way. Diana stared at me for a moment before nodding in acknowledgement and leaving the room, closing the door behind her. That was an interesting interaction, I guess. Looking down at Damien's sleeping form, he had turned his head in his sleep so I could only see the top of his orange head. I smiled slightly and kissed the top of his head, causing him to stir a bit in my arms. At the end of it all, I wondered what was best for us, and that was something we had to deal with together. Whether or not this ended with him being human or not was up in the air, but for now I had the responsibility of caring for him. Damien gently squeezed my form, allowing me to take in that he was awake now, and looked up at me with tired eyes.
Good morning.
I couldn't help but smile at his expression. He was an early bird, but the rare occasion where I caught him more entranced in sleep than me were moments I found so adorable. Good morning, sleepyhead. Damien blushed a bit before crawling up a bit and kissing me sweetly. I smiled wider against his lips and wrapped my arms around him, melting into the kiss lovingly. It had been years since I felt an incubus's energy drain, so to feel my energy snake over my nerves and into my lips felt odd. I had to get used to it again for now, and I tightened my arms around Damien to keep from pulling away from the slight surprise it brought me. As we slowly pulled away, I could see a tint of gold course through Damien's eyes as he looked down at me and licked his lips. A red tint brushed over my cheeks. Was my energy that delicious? What did it even taste like? Before I could ask, however, Damien sat up and stretched his arms over his head, letting a small yawn trickle from his throat. When he relaxed, he looked towards the table, seeing the food Diana brought us.
Oh, wow. Did you make that?
Ha! I wish. I looked over before shaking my head. Diana came and delivered it to us. Damien observed the plates for a bit as he listened to me before rolling out of bed and going over to the table and lifting the plates off of them. As he turned back to me, I took the time to sit up in bed, leaning back against the bedpost. Damien passed a plate to me and sat beside me, placing his own plate on his lap and eating what was prepared for us. I, however, watched for a moment, wondering what was going on in his head. What did he think about this whole thing? He seemed to be in better shape than he was before, which was good. Was he easily adjusting back to being a demon? Part of me felt a little happy at that idea, while the other part of me tried to be realistic. Oh yeah, it's just like a very easy adjustment. We'll just completely forget about that whole digging his fingernails into his scalp yesterday moment. This was temporary. Maybe. As Damien caught me staring, he looked up at me and stopped eating, causing me to flinch from being caught and start eating my own food.
What is it?
Hmm?
You were staring at me. What's wrong?
You're just so handsome. Yeah, like he'll buy that. Well, let's be honest. What do you think about this?
About what?
Well, about you being a demon and stuff. I couldn't read his mind. I needed to figure it out somehow, and it was better to ask him personally than to make assumptions. Maybe he changed his mind about the whole thing, or maybe it became worse. Only he knew. Damien looked down at his plate for a moment before closing his eyes.
I don't like it.
Fair enough. You don't.
I don't. As good as it is to have my powers back, I still don't like using them.
So you'd rather be a human without powers to fight? I didn't intend to be rude with the question, but the idea of enjoying a powerless life seemed rather odd to me. Damien nodded, affirming my comment.
I would rather have no abilities at all than live with the responsibility of them. Having power has brought me too much pain for me to be happy with them.
Damien looked up at me, a serious flame in his eyes.
But if having powers will get us home, then I will do everything I can to ensure that we return safely.
I stared wide-eyed at Damien, surprised at his words, but thankful for how much he was willing to work for us to get back home. He was right. What mattered at the moment was getting us home. We would figure the human part out after we returned. Damien and I continued to eat and eventually separated for training. Him to his brothers, and me towards my own training session. I was excited to see what training we would do today. However, as I walked to the great hall to meet with Rabbit, I bumped into someone.
Ugh. Oh no!
What?
Sorry, I didn't mean to hit you.
Who are you, cutie pie? You're adorable. Looking over at who had collided with me, I was surprised to see a young man in some sort of flowing cloth garb, waving his hands in front of him in worry. What was wrong? He just bumped into me. It was an accident for sure. It's all right. It's all right. Despite my reassurance, the boy bowed and apologized once again.
I really am truly sorry.
That's enough, Bajang.
Bajang? Bajangarang? I quickly looked over to see Diana walking towards me with crossed arms, looking to the boy as he flinched at his name. Bajang looked up and jumped up at the sight of Diana beside me.
Rebel Queen! I have a message from my lady.
Oh right, Rabbit wanted to talk to her. I wonder what that was all about.
I know. Come along, and I will hear it.
Diana gestured Bajang to follow her as she nodded to me.
I apologize for keeping you. Good luck with training.
Thanks. I could only nod before Diana walked off with the boy behind her. He seemed nice. I wondered for a moment who he was, but shook my head. A moment in time. I continued my journey to the Great Hall and turned into the room, peering in and expecting to see my trainer ready for me. That, unfortunately, wasn't the case. Rabbit stood in the middle of the room, her staff in front of her, while formed in a semicircle around her were pig fawn demons, ones that very much resembled the one I saw in the vision the boys gave me about their past. Why were they here, though? I don't know. My instinct is to jump in, but I couldn't just stand there. I had to help if Rabbit was in danger. Rabbit! I quickly rushed into the room and called out my guardian, letting him growl beside me at the intruders. Rabbit, however, looked back at me in surprise, while the imp demons around her quickly vanished into mist, fading into the air. I blinked a couple times, calling back my guardian and dispelling it in confusion. What the...
Oh, I'm sorry, I
stared at Rabbit, confused as ever. She turned around and let out a sigh.
I'm sorry. I was doing some training of my own. I'm usually not on the battlefield in war, but since the next battle will be our last, we need to have as many people fighting as we can.
I instantly shook my head. It was understandable. I wasn't the only one allowed to train after all. I'm kind of curious now, though. I'm just gonna save that. I might come back to that. But I'm wondering if I had watched, if I would have learned something from how she's doing. I was just worried about her. I was lost in what was happening, but something in my gut told me to stay put. Following my instincts, I watched as Rabbit stepped back, gripping her staff hard with the imp demons cackling quietly around her. A large blue light began to glow from the crystal at the end of her staff, causing the imps to turn and become distracted by it. As they did, however, Rabbit swung her staff in an arc, causing a large wave of ice to spray forward and engulf them. Cool, cool. I stared in shock as the imps became encased in ice, frozen in time and space. What made my mind completely break in awe was Rabbit lifting up the end of her staff and tapping on the surface of the ice. The bodies of the imps suddenly began to crack and crumble before dissolving into the ice as if they were never there. What the hell? I took another step in, trying to take in what had just happened. What kind of ice did Rabbit trap them in? Why were they there in the first place? What was going on? Rabbit turned over her shoulder and gasped, seeing me come in. As she did, the ice disappeared, evaporating into the air. Huh?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah, okay. That was cool, though. I'm glad I actually went back. I stared at Rabbit, confused as ever, as she turned around and let out a sigh.
I'm sorry. I was doing some training of my own. I'm usually not on the battlefield in war, but since the next battle will be our last, we need to have as many people fighting as we can.
I instantly shook my head. It was understandable. I wasn't the only one allowed to train after all. It's fine. Sorry for interrupting. Rabbit laughed a bit, hugging her staff to her body. It was pretty cute to see her stand up to the illusionary imps, but she seemed to handle herself well. After a moment, however, she shook her head and cleared her throat.
Anyway, we should start your training for the day. Can't let this time go to waste.
I nodded, summoning my guardian and readying myself. This time, Rabbit pointed her staff out and caused a large group of imps to appear, ready to slice into me and my animal guardian. I smirked, knowing how easy this would be. Upon my command, my guardian leapt forward and began to claw through the group, dodging their swords and spears and making sure to rip through each one as they came. As one fell and turned into mist, another would emerge to take its place. It became a practice of endurance. My animal kept fighting, but I felt myself slowly become weaker with each attack and movement. It had happened the day before, but the battles had been shorter and were divided with many breaks in between. Today, however, had me go through wave upon wave of imps until the afternoon, when I felt drained completely of energy. Soon my animal guardian dispelled itself, unable to maintain its form without my energy, leaving me defenseless. However, Rabbit spun her staff in the air, willing the imps to vanish. She walked over to me with a smile, most likely proud of what work I had done.
I'm very shocked to see how long you managed to keep fighting. Many people would have dropped halfway through, but you pushed forward.
Thanks. In truth, I didn't want to give up no matter what had happened. This was training, and stamina was a key part of defending myself. Rabbit looked to the windows, seeing the light of the afternoon slowly drift to the night.
Why don't we take a break for now? Then we'll do one last round before your training is over. All right?
Sounds good to me. I nodded, going to the far corner of the room and sitting down, wanting to shut my eyes for a moment and take a nap to regain my energy. I barely noticed the figure running into the room and approaching Rabbit.
My lady?
I opened an eye, looking up to see Bajang looking to Rabbit with a slight grimace on his expression. Rabbit turned to him and placed her staff to her side, tilting her head and furrowing her eyebrows.
Bajang, what is it?
Well, you see...
Rabbit stepped forward and checked Bajang's face, looking for something.
What's wrong? Did she take your energy?
Oh, no. She didn't. She refused to take any from me. But she gave me another message to send back to you.
Rabbit waited as Bajang took a breath and straightened up, calm from the flustered expression he carried earlier. Whatever he had to say must have been important.
She wants to speak with you alone tomorrow morning, before anything is settled.
Tomorrow morning? Why not tonight?
Bajang rubbed his hands, another grimace painting over his face.
Well, she said she had plans later tonight, so she can't.
Well...
With whom? Wait, never mind. I don't wish to know.
With a sigh, Rabbit turned and hugged her staff.
Thank you, Bajang. You're dismissed for the night.
Oh, thank you, my lady.
With that, Bajang bowed and turned, letting Rabbit sigh to herself, shaking her head.
Why do we have to keep discussing this?
Discussing what? I couldn't help but be curious. Rabbit looked over at me with a surprised face before pressing her lips together and looking away.
It's nothing to worry about. Just a minor topic we need to chat about. It's nothing.
Doesn't sound like nothing. From the tone of her voice, it was definitely something large. However, Rabbit wasn't willing to spill the beans just yet. I let it go for now, knowing that I would find out sooner or later, regardless of the fact. Bajang finally left as Rabbit let out a sigh and looked back to me, a desperate look for some sort of distraction in her eyes. Whatever Diana needed to talk to her about really riled her up. Still, I refused to let it get the best of me. I was certain that I would perfect fighting with my guardian and forget about whatever they were chatting about with ease.
Are you ready to go again?
I nodded, sitting up to go once more and shaking at my nerves. I was getting tired, but my day wasn't over. I trained into the night, like I usually did. This time, however, Rabbit seemed to be rougher with her obstacles and attacks, letting out stress from the situation she wouldn't tell me about. I felt a little bad that she was holding it in, but understood why. As Rabbit and I finally relaxed, Rabbit smiled at me, exhausted.
You're getting better. That's good.
I grinned and nodded, happy to know that there was improvement. As I turned to leave, however, Rabbit stopped me.
Wait,
Huh? What is it? I turned to see Rabbit rubbing one of her ears nervously.
Can you come a little later to practice tomorrow? You know that Diana is coming to discuss something, and, well...
She didn't want me to overhear it. My curiosity was piqued, but I nodded regardless. All right, I'll come by later. With a smile, I left Rabbit and made my way back to my room.